Last week, I was in Greece photographing a wedding, but since the trip was so short, I didn't really have any time to explore the island at sunset or golden hour. Instead, I only had one opportunity to head out and explore the island, but it was in the middle of the day in the harshest possible lighting. So in this video, I want to walk you through how I shoot and edit in harsh lighting, what I do when I can't control the conditions, and how I still walk away with images that I'm proud of. By the way, guys, if you're new here, my name's Maddie. I am a photographer and I run a free weekly newsletter called Captured. I also have a beginner photography course and presets, which you can go check out below. Okay, so when it comes to handling harsh lighting, I found that it comes down to where you position yourself and your camera when you're out shooting. And so that's what leads me into my first tip, and that's to always look for open shade. By finding the edge of where shade meets sunlight, like the side of a building or under a tree, for example, you're going to be able to evenly light your scenes and subjects whilst maintaining that color and pop in the backgrounds of your shots. By looking for open shade positions and avoiding direct sunlight, you're going to avoid a lot of harsh shadows and light streaks on your subjects and maintain detail even in the harshest of conditions. When I'm shooting wide travel shots or landscape photos, I always put myself in the shade and shoot towards the light. Doing this helps stop things being so blown out or too bright, and sometimes standing in the shade even helps you frame up different types of shots. And so this is just a small habit that I'd recommend, but this is slightly different to what I'd really look for, which is bounce lighting. Bounce light is when the sun hits something bright like a wall or pavement, and that light reflects into an area nearby. This kind of lighting is what you want to look for when you're out shooting because it softens everything up. In these locations, you're not shooting in full sun and you're not shooting in full shade either. Kind of this calm, glowy middle ground, where you can capture a lot of detailed and softer looking shots. On this island, I found many spots where the sun was hitting one side of a white wall, and then the space next to it, even just a few meters away, had a soft, even light that I absolutely love to photograph. The only way this works is because that first wall is absorbing all of that harsh midday sun and bouncing that light back into the scene into a much usable, photographable way. You don't always notice this at first when you're just walking around, but when you actually stop and look for the area that is being affected by a bounce light, you'll start to realize what a great tool this is to photograph in harsh conditions. Okay, so by now you might be thinking, Maddie, these are just ways you are escaping harsh lighting. And whilst that is true, the next way I approach harsh lighting is by actually embracing the light. By leaning into the harsh lighting from a creative perspective, you can really create different looking images that you won't get when you're shooting in golden hour or blue hour. One way I did this on this trip was by photographing the sea and a lot of coastal locations in this harsh lighting. Usually I would approach these types of shots right before the sun has gone down or right after to get a glowy look across the water. But on this day, considering I didn't have that option, still going out and taking that photograph in this harsh lighting really gave a different feel to the image. Instead of that glowy, sunsetty look, this image has that harsh, dry summer feeling, which is something that I really like, and especially what it felt like on the day. When you see images like this, you don't feel that warmth glow, you feel that harsh dryness and even the coolness of the water in the shot. So you don't always have to avoid the harsh lighting by looking for open shade or bounce lighting. Instead, if you really feel like it, embracing the harsh light, making sure you expose correctly, obviously, and shooting for that harshness, you can really create some cool looking images. Next, one of the most useful things I do to handle harsh lighting conditions is by using different elements in my foreground to block and shape the light I see. This may seem obvious to you, but using different elements in your foreground like trees, like buildings, like leaves, not only diffuse the light, but they help block a lot of harsh lighting on these days. Take a look at this shot here from one of the hills I hiked up. I used the palm trees to frame the scene and break up the sky pretty evenly. It's doing a few things, like it's adding depth, it's stopping the image from feeling flat, and most importantly, it's handling the exposure of the image quite well. You can also see something similar in this shot here. By standing in the open shade from the building and looking up to photograph the palm tree, I could block the sun and harsh sunlight in my foreground with the building and still get that soft looking feeling in the tree. When you're not just photographing the subject or the scene that you want right in front of you and you're placing elements in the foreground, you'll find yourself photographing through things. And in a previous video, I spoke about how this adds story and depth to your images. And whilst that is true, in harsh lighting, it really helps diffuse and block a lot of harsh light. Lastly, one final habit that I have when I'm in these harsh lighting conditions is by focusing and photographing textures. In soft lighting, textures are quite difficult to photograph because there's not a lot of natural contrast in the shots. So by focusing on these types of shots in harsh lighting, I'm just capturing new compositions that I'm not always going to get in that soft golden hour. Focusing in on textures as well means you're not always letting in a whole bunch of light onto your sensor, so those detail shots are really going to stand out. Alright, next I want to talk about the camera settings I use when I'm photographing in harsh light. When I'm shooting in harsh lighting, like most of my travel photography, I like to keep it extremely simple, and I'll have my camera set to aperture priority. And it's with this aperture priority that I would rarely stop below f4 because I want that detail and to control the amount of light coming in, but also because I want to keep a shutter speed of around 1/1000. I want to quickly freeze time and not let in too much light in these situations, so 1/1000 is really key. The main thing though when it comes to my camera settings is that I'm always exposing for the highlights. If you try exposing for the shadows and you lose the highlights in the sky or in a wall, it's going to be very difficult to bring back. And so that's why I also use my histogram when I'm in these locations. The histogram is far more reliable than what my eyes are seeing in the EVF because my eyes are going to be exposed for the sunlight on the day, and the histogram is only focused on the image I'm capturing. So by making sure there's an even spread on the histogram, and if in any case the highlights are pushed towards the right side of the histogram, I will always bring them down using the exposure compensation dial. This all might sound really technical if this is your first time out shooting or in these harsh lighting conditions, so otherwise I would just recommend putting it in auto to start out with. But if you are experienced and you do know what you're doing, 1/1000, f4, use the exposure compensation dial and focus on the histogram. Lastly, I want to cover something really important, and that is editing harsh lighting photos. The light at midday takes away a lot of the details from your shots, and the raw files don't always look that great straight out of camera, so editing will play a major role in making your photos look decent. For me, the goal with my editing isn't to fake golden hour or make them look super soft. Instead, it's to actually bring down the intensity of that harsh lighting. I'll usually start with one of my base presets, then pull the exposure down, reduce the highlights and reduce the whites, lift the blacks, and oftentimes soften the clarity by -10 roughly. I've also found that dropping the contrast a lot more than usual works great, since the sun is already doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to creating contrast in the scenes. As for the color adjustments, I always just handle the colors I'm seeing in that particular photo, and for all the photos I captured here in Greece, I was really desaturating the blues and the yellows. The intensity in the sky and the sea was too much with the blues not desaturated, so bringing them down just a little bit really softened up the shots. So like I said, my goal with editing is to really calm down my images. By dropping the contrast, the exposure, the saturations, I just bring down the intensity of that sharpness without pretending it's not midday lighting. So there are always ways to adjust to the conditions, but don't let harsh lighting stop you from picking up your camera, especially when you're out traveling. You don't know when you're going to be back in these locations again. And so if you're traveling or you're a hobbyist, don't let the lighting in the moment that you have to photograph dictate when you take photos. If you want to learn a bit more about the habits I use when I'm out taking photos that isn't just related to midday lighting, I would recommend checking out the following video. Otherwise guys, I will see you in the next video.